Should we be scared? NASA warns of a massive solar storm coming to Earth. Solar storms usually show up every now and then, and while it hasn't been much of a worry for humanity, NASA has just warned us of a massive one that might just hit Earth. So, should we be scared? Keep watching this video to find out. What you need to know. Due to an Earth-directed plasma blast that can disrupt GPS and radio signals, a major solar storm warning has been issued by NASA. Experts believe the major explosion on the sun's far side is responsible for the storm's development. A highly bright and swift coronal mass ejection was seen by the European Space Agency's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, streaming away from the sun's southeastern limb. When the sun burps forth a cloud of charged particles and electromagnetic disturbances, we see a coronal mass ejection, one of the most intense types of a solar storm. In addition, shock waves from the explosion were observed by NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory, wrapping around both poles of the sun, which spaceweather.com has interpreted to be evidence of an extremely powerful explosion, potentially an X-flare. They continued, Earth-orbiting satellites identified only a C4 class event because radiation from the flare was overshadowed by the edge of the sun, lowering its intensity by 1 to 2 orders of magnitude. Other expert opinions. Dr. Tamitha Skov, a physicist and space weather researcher based in Los Angeles, tweeted, "A new region, likely to be designated 3182, shoots up a big flare on the sun's far side. It will increase the risk of a radio blackout at the R1 level to 45%. This means there is a 5% chance of an S1 level radiation storm occurring within the next 3 days. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration defines R1 as a small level of disruption. NOAA also uses a 5-point scale to classify solar radiation storms. No satellite activities will be affected by S1, and only minimal effects on high-frequency radio in the polar regions will occur." However, Dr. Skov said, if a solar storm headed for Earth hits now, followed by the swift solar wind, then it's safe to assume that GPS and amateur radio will have trouble working at night. Will we see the auroras? Auroras are natural light shows created when particles from the solar wind excite atoms in Earth's upper atmosphere, causing them to sparkle. If you happen to be in the northern hemisphere and witness them, you'll be treated to the aurora borealis. But if you're on the other side of the world, you'll witness the aurora australis. Colors of the aurora vary with the type of atoms being excited and the curtains of light that develop along the geomagnetic field lines. Oxygen, which gives off a bluish-green glow, and nitrogen, which appears in the spectrum of blue, pink, and purple, are the two most abundant gases in Earth's atmosphere. Is this linked to the C3 flare? In a statement released on January 3rd, the NOAA noted, a coronal mass ejection erupted from just beyond the east limb. The mass ejection looked to be linked to a C3 flare. The solar ultraviolet imager showed the flare, which appeared to have originated from an active zone beyond the east limb. According to the helioseismology data collected by the National Solar Observatory and the Global Oscillation Network Group, an active zone is only a day or so away from becoming visible on the sun's disk. This coronal mass ejection, or CME, was carefully studied and tracked because CMEs might grow significantly during their interplanetary trip. The results suggested that the planet passed beyond Earth's orbit on January 6, 2023. The Carrington event, the strongest geomagnetic storm ever recorded, was triggered by a coronal mass ejection in September 1859. The storm disrupted communications across the recently laid transatlantic cable, which connected telegraph networks in Europe and North America. According to reports, the space weather event created enough current in cables to cause telegraph pylons to spark, operators to receive electric shocks, and some lines to break entirely. Meanwhile, other connections were discovered to be functional after their power was off, due to the robustness of the electrical currents created by the storm. Research presented at the SIGCOM 2021 conference by the Association for Computing Machinery suggests that a major solar storm, like the Carrington event, might disrupt the internet for weeks. The internet's backbone fiber optic cables are not affected by electromagnetic oscillations, like those induced by solar storms, unlike the telegraph lines of the Victorian era. However, the signal boosters installed along submarine cables to keep connections stable over great distances cannot make this claim. These long-distance cables are especially susceptible to the effects of space weather, and it is more difficult to make repairs to them because they are submerged in water. Astrophysicists estimate a 1.6 to 12% risk that a solar storm devastating enough to damage modern society would hit Earth within the next decade. Exactly what would happen if a solar storm strikes Earth? In light of the recent spat of solar outbursts, some researchers are concerned that Earth could be hit by a geomagnetic storm. The Earth, however, remains safe for the time being, as the flare-up was quite small. Scientists haven't worked out what triggers the sun to explode in periodic flare-ups, so it's difficult to forecast when another one will occur. Our modern navigational aids and underwater internet connections would be rendered useless if a geomagnetic storm were to occur right now. How the sun operates, why it throws hot plasma our way, and the implications of space weather are all explored by Inverse as scientists strive to determine the nature of the solar storm triggered by the newest shockwave. How do solstice effects show up on Earth? Our own sun is a very dynamic star. A solar flare is an outburst that can cause a temporary disturbance in Earth's magnetic field. Extremely powerful eruptions from the sun are the primary cause of significant space weather, and a phenomenon called coronal mass ejections is directly tied to solar flares. Large bubbles of gas and magnetic flux carrying billions of tons of charged particles at millions of kilometers per hour are what these eruptions amount to. When the sun explodes, it releases a torrent of heated plasma, some of which travels across the solar system. Geomagnetic storms are occasionally triggered when these clouds and the shock waves they generate reach Earth. Major disruptions of the magnetosphere, the region of space dominated by Earth's magnetic field, occur during geomagnetic storms. The storms are typically visible as magnificent aurora in the night sky, but they may also cause significant disruptions to Earth's power grids and navigational systems. On August 7, 1972, the planet experienced a geomagnetic storm, one of the last of its kind to have a significant effect. An enormous solar flare erupted from the surface of the Earth, setting off a powerful magnetic storm that interfered with radio waves, telecommunications networks, and power grids. Are we truly nearing another major solar storm? The National Weather Service's Space Weather Prediction Center recently predicted that a geomagnetic storm might follow the most recent solar tsunami. However, planet Earth appears to be safe for the time being. A solar flare of the C3 class is rather weak and should have no noticeable effects on Earth. According to space weather, a partial halo coronal mass ejection was emitted from the sun at a relatively modest speed of roughly 500 kilometers per second. However, it triggered a partial halo coronal mass ejection that is now on its way to Earth and may cause a mild geomagnetic storm. Can a solar storm destroy Earth? Don't worry, even if a massive solar storm lands on Earth, it won't be powerful enough to destroy the planet. Although it is possible that electrical systems may be damaged by solar flares if they are strong enough to reach Earth. Computer scientist Sangeeta Abdujyoti voiced concern at the most recent SIGCOMM data communication conference last August that the existing power infrastructures and massive internet cables on Earth might be unable to endure a solar storm. Jyoti brought attention to the fact that undersea wires are vulnerable due to poor grounding. If a solar storm were to strike the Earth right now, it would likely wipe out all of our satellites and GPS systems. How often do solar storms hit Earth? Despite decades of research, scientists still have no idea what triggers these storms, or how to foretell when the next one will occur. However, NASA does keep a watch on our sun with satellites like SOHO, in case it decides to flare up our way. Furthermore, spacecrafts traveling toward the sun, such as the Parker Solar Probe, will collect enough data about our host star to assist scientists in forecasting its behavior. Scientists must keep a close eye on our star in case it decides to wreak havoc with our cutting-edge equipment. See you next time, and thanks for watching.